at this beach, the Chinese soldiers try to come from Xiamen that you see in the back by boat and try to take Kinmen Island. The fighting in 1954 was extremely fierce. There was Chinese artillery fire, but China also tried to land on Kinmen once again.
As you see, this is a more serious video. Today we will talk about the struggle of Kinmen and how the island remained part of Taiwan. In fact, the faith of Kinmen laid the ground for the status quo of the Chinese-Taiwanese borders today.
There is a small Taiwanese island right next to the Chinese mainland. From here, in Kinmen Island, it takes less than 2 kilometers to go to the Chinese mainland. So in this video, I will try and answer the question why Kinmen is part of Taiwan by doing a little research here on the island itself. It has something to do with the tank that you see behind me and the Chinese Civil War, and we will figure out more in this video, so let's go. Hello and welcome back to the Traveling Kunst YouTube channel. I'm your host Ferdinand, and today we're gonna talk about why is Kinmen part of Taiwan until this very day. I am standing here at the beach of Guningtou. This is actually the place where in 1949 Chinese soldiers tried to attack Kinmen Island. This is the last battleground of the Chinese Civil War. However, the Chinese army was not successful. The Taiwanese soldiers could repel the attack, and Kinmen remains part of Taiwan until this very day. You can actually see Xiamen in the back. This is where the soldiers came from, and you also see some leftovers from the battle in the water. There are some obstacles. In this video, we're gonna drill deeper into the history and try to answer the question how Taiwan managed to remain hold on Kinmen, and we will also see that the Battle of Guningtou was not the last battle taking place on Kinmenese ground. So let's go.
The beach today is peaceful with a great view towards Xiamen in China. At first glance, it is hard to tell that this was once a battlefield, unless of course you turn around and see the giant bunker that nature has slowly taken back. Anyway, on the night of the 24th of October 1949, the Chinese army launched its attack on Kinmen. The beach itself doesn't reveal much, but there is a dedicated museum nearby, so that's where we're heading next.
The Battle of Guningtou Museum is an absolute must-visit place for your Kinmen trip. I'm in it right now, and you have all the scenes and so much background information. Over here, you also find the Bear of Kinmen, the tank that you saw in the introduction of this video. It was the tank that opened fire first at the attacking Chinese troops. During the battle, it literally ran out of bullets and started bulldozing over the attacking soldiers. More of that, all the crazy stories you find in here, so make sure to check out the museum.
The Chinese army hastily put together a landing force, mostly relying on regular fishermen's boats to reach the island. And of course, they lost the Battle of Kinmen due to unexpected resistance from the islanders. There were also a couple of other reasons, such as the weather. I'll leave you a link to the museum and more information in the description below.
The KMT lost the Chinese Civil War, but they managed to win the last battle. They managed to win the Battle of Guningtou, which was an important moral boost for the so often defeated army, but also marked the end of the Chinese Civil War and marked the status quo between China and Taiwan until this very day.
The battle was extremely fierce. China suffered heavy casualties and decided not to make any further attempts to invade Taiwan, for now at least.
The Chinese army officially claims that all 9,000 Red Army soldiers died in action. However, it is proved that around 7,000 Red Army soldiers ended up as prisoners of war in Taiwan.
I have to say that after the chaotic landing on the beach, some Red Army troops fled to the nearest village and managed to establish a small commando post, but only for a few hours, and then they had to surrender. The leftovers of the Baishan outpost are still standing today and have become a famous landmark. you can still see the bullet holes from the battle, and many veterans visit this place. I think nowhere else on the island will you find such an authentic reminder that Kinmen was once a battleground.
By 1950, the Chinese Civil War was over and Kinmen had around 40,000 inhabitants. However, Chiang Kai-shek had big plans, and even Kinmen just survived a battle. It faced a very harsh future. The island got very much militarized.
The Chinese Civil War was not the end, but rather the beginning of Kinmen's role at the center of major international conflicts. Symbolic for the spirit of the time are the large red characters painted in 1952 on the Taiyu Mountain, the highest point of Kinmen. Wu Wang Zai Jue translates to "do not forget what happened in Yue." The idiom refers to an ancient story of battle and revenge, reflecting the KMT's determination to strike back. However, for the years to come, Kinmen saw no fighting. I found this footage showing what life must have looked like on the island in the 1950s.
In 1950, Chiang Kai-shek became the head of state in Taiwan. He and the nationalists were absolutely convinced to attack China once again, and therefore Kinmen was a key priority. There's massive spending on military fortifications like this one. You have bunkers, you have tunnels. Of course, China also wanted to give the final burst to the nationalists. They also wanted to attack Kinmen, and they also were just waiting for the right timing. A person who didn't like that was President Truman in the US, because the US in 1950 started to get involved in the Korean War, and they could not have another conflict zone in Asia. Therefore, Truman sent the Navy into the Taiwan Strait and asked them to sit it down. There was a blockage. So from 1950 to 1953, Kinmen was actually fairly calm. At the same time, there was massive spending into military infrastructure. And of course, that is a tourist attraction. Today, you have all these bunkers and tunnels that you can see.
I'm telling you all of this from the Lion Fort on the Jiaogong Island, which today is a popular tourist destination. Here you will find also another symbol of resistance, a giant statue of Ko Xing-ga. I talked about him in my episode on the history of Kinmen. However, at the time the United States were busy with the war in Korea and had very little interest in Taiwan launching any attacks on China, at least for the time being.
In 1953, the Korean War ended and the US had a new president. President Eisenhower decided it is time to unleash Chiang Kai-shek and use him to fight back communism. That meant that the Navy blockage in the Taiwan Strait was opened, and Chiang Kai-shek decided to put 48,000 troops on Kinmen Island and another 15,000 on Matsu Island. The Chinese, of course, recognized the threat and were afraid that Taiwan tries again to conquer China. So they started heavily artillery shelling on Kinmen Island. In 1954, we had the first Taiwanese Strait Crisis.
Kinmen was once again a battleground and once again drew the attention of world leaders. There are so many details to tell, including the early plans of what later became known as Project National Glory, Chiang Kai-shek's plan to defeat Communist China. But for the sake of time, let's quickly summarize the first Quemoy Matsu crisis.
Now, the first Taiwanese Strait Crisis was extremely fierce. There was heavy artillery shelling, and there was also the attempt to deploy Chinese troops once again on Kinmen. The Taiwanese army, with the support of the US, was able to defend the island once again. However, 2 American military consultants died in Chinese artillery fire, and that led to further escalation. At some point, the US even considered using nuclear weapons against China. However, by 1955, the situation calmed down and Kinmen remained part of Taiwan.
A quick jump to today's Kinmen. The Taiwanese government has confirmed that there are US military personnel stationed on Kinmen. Luckily, there's no more artillery fire. I wrote a blog post about this story in case you want to know more details.
So if there was a first Taiwanese Strait crisis, you can expect there's going to be a second one, and that happened in 1958. There was another clash on the Dongding Island. They are also part of Kinmen, and they remain part of Kinmen until this very day. However, things got very serious. What followed was 44 days of heavy artillery shelling on Kinmen Island. That was the fiercest attack until this day. However, after 3 months of battling, both sides also remained at the status quo, and Kinmen once again remained part of Taiwan.
From 1955, the Taiwanese government used the time to fortify the island even more. For example, they built several artillery fortifications underground or directly into solid rock. Today, the mountain lion howitzer fort, for example, remains open as a tourist attraction.
If you want to see how fierce the situation was in 1958, you have to visit the 23rd of August Artillery Museum in Kinmen. That's where I am right now. It is reopened. They renovated this place. It's completely new. And here you can find out more about the artillery battle, about the suffering. It's an extremely important day all over Taiwan. There is celebrations and memories. So I really recommend that you check this place out.
In 1958, Kinmen was shelled like never before. After more than a month of continuous bombardment, China had to reduce the shelling, and it took a few more months for the situation to fully de-escalate. The United States once again intervened, and Kinmen remained part of Taiwan.
However, luckily, the 23rd Artillery Battle was the turning point. It was the most fierce battle in the history of Taiwanese and Chinese relation, but luckily, until then, things turned around and we slowly improving the relation between Kinmen, China and Taiwan.
That didn't mean that Kinmen was completely safe after 1958. Shelling with artillery continued, though it was less intense and more predictable. New fortifications were also built on the island, such as the Xinjiang Defense Tunnel, a network of tunnels running beneath the capital of Kinmen, and you probably guessed it by now, it is also a tourist attraction today.
If you want to get an idea how fierce the battling was, I recommend that you visit the Mountain Lion Howitzer Front in Kinmen. Almost daily, they have a simulation of a military drill where they show you how the artillery was used. If you cannot make it to Kinmen or you don't have time to go to the museum, check out my video about it. I also filmed the whole drill.
Remembering the August 23rd artillery battle and honoring the fallen soldiers plays an important role on Kinmen. However, there is much more to see and explore.
At this point, a quick side note. Kinmen today is a beautiful tourist island with many things to see. Of course, you have all these old military fortifications, but you also have beautiful beaches, you have amazing nature, you have really great stuff to do and see without all the army stuff. So I highly recommend that you come over here and also check out my other videos, because I have videos about the best beaches, about the best outdoor places, about the nightlife and so much more. You find them in the description below, and once you're down there, please do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. But now, back to the history.
In this video, the non-military tourist sites don't play a major role, but trust me, there is plenty of them and they are really worth exploring.
Now, I just want to point out, if you're into old military history, there is more than the Battle of Guningtou Museum and the 23rd of August Artillery Museum in Kinmen. I have dedicated videos about several underground tunnels and military fortifications that you find here on the island. They are all open to the public. But now, let's move on.
After 1979, things finally calmed down and Kinmen started its journey to become the tourist destination it is today. The artillery shelling finally stopped that year, a commitment China made after the United States established diplomatic relations with China and cut ties with Taiwan. From then on, the military fortifications and equipment on the island slowly transitioned from active duty into museum pieces.
The martial law ended at some point in Taiwan, and it took until 1995 until Kinmen was open to the public and the first tourists came. The transition period pretty much started. A very important benchmark then came in 2001 when the direct ferry connection to Xiamen in China that you see behind me was opened. Since then, Chinese people can come to Kinmen without the need of a Chinese visa. By today, they are the largest tourist group on the island, and they really sort of helped turning Kinmen into a tourist hotspot. The number of soldiers on this island has been massively reduced. There are still some military fortifications over here, but it's nothing compared to back in the day when there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the island. The artillery shells bombed on Kinmen also turned into knives. That's a different story. I spoke about that in my video about the products of Kinmen. And there's so much more to say about the tourist sensations that you find on the island, but I saved that for another video.
I am for sure will not run out of Kinmen stories. There are so many things to cover, like the island's fascination with Teresa Tang and the history of the landmines on Kinmen. So stay tuned. There will be more Kinmen content coming, but after my upcoming trip to Japan.
And it's time to wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you like it. If you do, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Besides videos about Kinmen and Taiwan, I also have a few other travel videos. For instance, I came just back from Vietnam. And I also have a blog where I frequently write articles. So I really hope that I see you again. Until then, have a good time. Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you soon.